Good. Good evening. Tonight's shiur is the third of a series of 3 shiurim that we are speaking about the halachas of kashrus, various aspects of kashrus. The title of today's shiur is also a more broader subject, a peek behind the scenes of the world of kosher food manufacturing. Learn about some of the interesting modern shaylos and halacha. What makes the world of kashrus so fascinating is that on one hand, the foundation of all the halachas is based on the rule of Torah. And the rule of Torah, the Rambam writes, Yisachas Yisoidi HaTorah, Davar Barar Mefurash BaTorah, Shehi Mitzvah Imedes La'olam La'omei Elamim. It's a mitzvah. Torah, everything in Torah is forever, everlasting. Ein Le'Shina, there's no change. Le'Giroim V'Le'Tisefes. We can't minus anything. We can't subtract anything. We can't add anything. Everything in Torah is 100%. And whomever we work with, kashrus, whether it's working, setting up companies or implementing rules of halacha, rules of kashrus, we make it clear that the rule of kosher is non-negotiable. We have no way of changing it, even with times. Time does not change any of the rules of kashrus. And on the other hand, we often deal with modern shaylos in halacha. We deal with newer technology. We deal with new equipment, redeveloped ingredients, and in most cases, will not find a clear halacha regarding the subject at hand. Which is why being able to apply pure halacha to modern times is a complicated process. And there may be various opinions of how to approach it. In some cases, you have differences of opinions based on the place of where you grew up, where the background where you came from. Ashkenazi or Sephardi poskim. Ashkenazim usually follow the Ramah, and the Minhagi Ashkenaz, the Sephardim, they follow the Bis Yosef, the Mechaber as is known, and the Poiski Sfard. And then, in that alone, there's many poskim that you will follow a consensus, a majority of poskim on the matter. Some will follow less accepted opinions. So, for example, you have shaylos like Chalav Yisrael. The big debate in America is the milk in America need to be Chalav Yisrael. And so, even though there's a dispute in poskim, obviously, different communities adapt to different things, different minhagim, different policies. And although many, the Pashtus halacha is that it requires Chalav Yisrael, Rav Moshe, or the Heter, and there are those communities that will follow that. However, most kehillas, the Charedsha kehillas follow, they need to require Chalav Yisrael. There's also in Pas Yisrael, because some kehillas didn't accept it initially, there's a question how to adapt it today and how much of today's, how much you're supposed to be machmer Pas Yisrael. And that's what you'll find different hechshedim following creating their policies based on the psukim that their poskim decided based on different sources. What's important, especially to us, we're speaking mostly to Olam Lubavitcher crowd, Chassidish crowd, and it's really for everyone. For someone who follows the Shulchan Aruch Harav, follows the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, like Chassidei Chabad and many other Chassidish kreisen, for them the Alter Rebbe is the Poisek Achrein, and if anything the Alter Rebbe paskins, even if it's against other opinions, even if others dispute the Alter Rebbe, we follow the Alter Rebbe's opinion. And there will be times where the Alter Rebbe, there will be differences, and for example, when it comes to the Alter Rebbe wrote a lot about kasher and kelim. So let's say someone wants to have kosher chocolate. So in order to make kosher chocolate, so if you have a dedicated kosher power plant, that's easy. But if you have a plant that has been doing chalav vacuum or chalav stam chocolate, the companies that do chalav Yisrael, the company itself will not allow you to kasher their equipment with water. And the Alter Rebbe brings down in Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Pesach that in order to kasher, you need to kasher hagala with boiling water. And he says there, l'chatchila, you should not kasher with shar mashkim. But the Eved could be kosher, but l'chatchila you shouldn't. So the question is, in the case of that, in the case where you are you allowed to kasher a chocolate factory that does chalav vacuum with shar mashkim? It's one of the things that Rabbi Levi was very strong about, that the paraf line should be dedicated. You shouldn't kasher between chalav vacuum and parav, or chalav vacuum and chalav Yisrael, because of that, because of these dinim. There's actually another reason as well, because when it comes to chalav Yisrael, when it comes to kashering, the way a lot of companies, they'll kasher, they'll flush their machines with hot cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is a type of oil that's based out of cocoa, and they'll heat it up to the temperature, the malababu is to the proper temperature to kasher it. But it's not so simple, because the cocoa butter solidifies at room temperature. Is that even considered mashkin? Mashkin is something that's liquid at room temperature. Shortening or butters or oils that congeal, like become hardened at room temperature, that itself is a question if it's considered a mashke to kasher with. And Moshe brings this down as well. So this will be an example if you follow the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch to rely on a kashering that was done between chalav vacuum and parav, between chalav vacuum and chalav Yisrael with liquid. That would be with shar mashkin wouldn't be a lechatchila. Another area, for example, where the Alter Rebbe may differ from others is, for example, when it comes to Birchas Hanenin. Alter Rebbe writes a lot about Birchas Hanenin. He writes, there's a discussion about what's criteria to make something mezainis and amar or amaitzi. Right? So the famous question is a slice of pizza is a mezainis or amaitzi? The Alter Rebbe has a different opinion than others about that, and some want to say that pizza inherently, because it has the cheese in it, it's mezainis. It's like a pie. It has a filling, but the Alter Rebbe says clearly that even if you have a pie and you have a filling, if the filling is not a fruit, it's not a sweet thing, it's a thing that fills you like cheese, like dairy or meat, a meat pie, that wouldn't be enough of a reason to make him mezainis. Obviously, there could be other reasons like shar mashkin, but if we follow the Alter Rebbe, we have to know when he differs from others. So when you go to a pizza shop and the pizza shop is telling you the pizza is mezainis, you have to know why he's saying it's mezainis. You have to know, is he saying it because he follows his own poskim and their criteria of what makes pizza moitzi or mezainis, or is he following the Alter Rebbe's position in that? There's also, for another example, would be where the Alter Rebbe would differ is the bracha on rice. The bracha on rice is a question, is a suffix, and instead that the Mishnah Brura holds that the bracha on rice is mezainis, and therefore if you'll see a lot of cereal boxes or other food products that will say on it on foods that are based on rice, mezainis. However, if we follow the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he has a different position. Alter Rebbe holds that it's shahakol, nabanefesh should be machmer, but definitely not mezainis. So, even if there is a hechsher on a cereal box and the hechsher says a bracha, we have to know is that hechsher basing itself on the psakim of our rabbanim, the psakim of our shittis, or the psakim from other shittis. And that goes with every kreis. If you follow the Mishnah Brura, that's your final psak, then you should know if the hechsher is following that psak or a different psak. So that is, so it's not to say, which is why it's not to say that a certain hechsher, even though it's run by frum people, erlicha people, knowledgeable people, there still may be a reason why you don't accept it that for a certain item, and that is not necessarily because they're not acceptable, but because your guidelines may be different than theirs. You follow different piskei halacha than them, and that's why really able to decide things, especially with kashrus and with other halachas, it's important to have your own rav, a rav, your own individual rav that knows your qualities and what your hashkafas are, and what your halakha, how you base your halacha on, and that's how you'll get the best information to determine what is a good hechsher and what psakim to follow. And this is also when it comes to factoring and deciding halacha, another factor it will be is to determine about is not just that the rav that's making a decision halacha knows the different opinions and machriya the right way, but also that he knows the mitzias. If you have a rav who knows theory of the halacha but doesn't know how this particular piece of equipment is made, he can come up to the wrong judgment. Sometimes you find that in Piskei Dinim where a rav will say that this rav said so and so, but that's if the mitzias is so and so. But being that I know that the mitzias is different, therefore the psak should be different. So you really have to know the mitzias in order to be able to paskin a din, and then ultimately you have to implement the din, which is that if you're in the hechsher world and you just make a decision in halacha, and you understand that you mitzias and you come to a psak din, then what you have to do is to make sure that you implement policies, you implement proper rules that the companies and the people that you're trying to press upon them to follow these rules are able to implement them properly. I'll give an example. There was the company that they don't have a hechsher, that they don't do chol Yisrael on their pastries and the bakery baked goods, and they're not run by Yidden, they're not owned by Yidden, but there's a hechsher. The hechsher is for chol stam. So, with discussing with them, there was a question about upgrading them to make them chol Yisrael, and in theory, it would sound be a very novel thing that a company that's willing to go the extra mile and convert their bakery from chol stam to chol Yisrael would be a great thing. But if you know the mitzias, if you understand that this is a very large company, and they're a high quality company, and a company like that, they would need large quantities of the chol Yisrael ingredients readily available. And if you know the market at the time when this decision was made, there's limits on certain items that they needed to be chol Yisrael, and there wouldn't be enough in the market. Maybe 1 week there will be, 1 week there won't be. And as soon as you have you have a short supply, and in addition you also have a difference in price and a difference in quality sometimes. Sometimes you only could get chol Yisrael, but it's not such a good quality. So what you're doing is you're creating a michshel for a company that wants to do the right thing, and you're telling him, take on this extra chumrah, take on this extra level of kashrus, but at the same time, the chance of you making a mistake or purposely smuggling in not chol Yisrael product into your chol Yisrael claimed facility is much greater. And so therefore, you have to always know when you try to implement a rule of kashrus, to make sure you have a system that you're able to implement it. Like, for example, companies that have sensitive ingredients that are hard to get kosher. For example, the company is getting they have one of the ingredients is hard to get kosher. So they're getting gelatin, and there's not too many kosher gelatins. So even if they have enough kosher gelatin on hand, what usually would make sense to require by them is to hold on stock months of supply of the kosher gelatin. So this way they should never say we run out of stock. They should never be short, because we know it's sensitive and we know that it costs a lot, and there's an extra incentive for them to get not kosher. So we try to make extra measures to protect us against a mistake in sensitive areas. Now, another factor when paskening halacha would be that there are many areas in kashrus that a lot of piski dinim, a lot of rabbanim which paskin, they're making they're deciding their psakim based on the halacha strictly, and not based on the minhagim, whether minhagim of the community or minhagim of family minhagim, or different area minhagim from different places. And so it could be that the psak halacha is so and so, but you, because you're from this community, you may have a certain minute to be machmer in a certain area, and they didn't factor that in. For example, the Rebbe brings down about the sakana of leaving garlic or onion or eggs overnight unpeeled. And so, if a hechsher will say that based on the piskei halacha that they follow, that in this particular case, whether it's because of commercial reasons, because it's commercialized, that they're allowed to leave the eggs and the garlic overnight without adding anything. So that may fit the halacha based on what their psakim, the poskim determine. But there are those that will have particular minhagim to be machmer, whether they be machmer unless you add. Some people are machmer that unless you add salt or other flavors to it, or sugar to it, that you can't leave it overnight. And there are others that say that even salt is not enough. You have to add something that gives it a different color and a different appearance. And so, because people have different minhagim, you have to know the particular hechsher, if they take on this minig or not, and if they don't, are you still allowed to consume it? Another example will be, let's say, the minig of those. There are those that have a minig not to mix dairy and fish together. So even if it's not a minig that's universal, a lot of akshedim will not implement it because may not be in the realm of halacha. You have to know if you have that minig to be machmir, to understand that the hechsher may not factor that into their decision. And in general, I guess the last factor is that the Arshedim will usually give a psak din based on the broad Jewish community that they're dealing with. And so if someone wants to be machmir beyond that, that's something that they have to do on their own and not rely on the hechsher. Like if you look at Shulchan Aruch, all across Shulchan Aruch, many piskidinim end off a machmir tavel bracha, Yerushalayim, Yitzil Dishtayim. There's a lot of Alter Rebbe brings down a lot, and different poskim bring down that if someone wants to be machmir, Yerushalayim, Bal Nefesh, has room to be machmir. That's again something that's beyond the scope of many Akshedim, because they're determining the psak based on what the rule is, what the halacha is, and you have to know that if you're only machmir, it's sort of your own. Obviously, it's as Chassidim we know, it's one of the foundations of Chassidim is hider mitzvah. Chassid is someone who's lefnim yishur hadin. So that's something which is beyond the world of Akshedim. Some Akshedim may advertise that that's their whole hechsher is to yaitza all the hidurim and yaitza all the chumras, but not most Akshedim. So let's go to some practical shaylos that come up, some shaylos that come up and how we deal with them, and see how we could implement them in our. So one of the recent shaylos that came up is not actually a recent shayla. It's something which has been around forever, but it resurfaced because of recent controversy that there was a Sprite drink that's sold in Europe that some Rabbanim are saying you can't drink it, and some Rabbanim are allowing to use it. Have you heard of that controversy? Do you know what the controversy is about? What's wrong with the Sprite? What suddenly happened that made them say you shouldn't drink the Sprite? Ah, so the controversy is based on a simple ingredient called cream of tartar. Have you ever tried to make a meringue with egg whites, make a snow and after you whip it and you build it up, suddenly it collapses, or it collapses when you bake it? Do you know how to prevent it? Well, one of the ways to prevent it is cream of tartar. This cream of tartar is a very it's an old ingredient. It's a byproduct from the wine casks, from when they ferment grape juice. Then there's a buildup on the walls of on the wine casks that is a hard and like pieces of rock, and they would collect them and use them to this ingredient, cream of tartar. So we'll see soon how it's made today, but in the past it was sort of an afterthought. There was something that was these old barrels, wooden barrels that had wine in them. They were empty. They were sitting around. There's this dry sediment sitting there, and they made use out of it. They were able to make something called tartaric acid, and which is also known as sodium bitartarate. It has many good properties to it. It has ability to stabilize egg whites. It could whip cream and hold ear pockets very large and tall. It's a thickening agent. It thickens the different mixes. It also prevents, if you have sugars and you don't want them to crystallize, it prevents crystallization. It has also properties of a preservative. It preserves the color, it preserves the product lasts longer. In the past, it was used to make a baking powder. And it is even used as a cleaning agent in certain cases. What type of products would you find it in? You'd find it in some candies, in soft drinks, like we mentioned earlier, Sprite. Sprite has it as well. Sprite from Europe claims to have it as well. I don't know if I haven't heard that it's Sprite in other places, but in Europe I've heard that. You can find it in like a fluffy pastry, like when you make a meringue or a snickerdoodle cookie, and so it's commonly used in different products. I just noticed that in the sweet and low packs, they have the cream of tartar in them as well. Now it has a lot of these products have hechshedim, and hechshedim, generally there are hechshedim that accept cream of tartar as a kosher ingredient. And like we said, it's been around for a long time, except that today the process is a little different. It's a little more advanced. So what is the deal with cream of tartar? It's very often, there's very little, I'll say, of cream of tartar today that's based on kosher wine. There is some, but not that much. Most of the cream of tartar on the market today is from stam yayin, and the Shulchan Aruch discusses this in Siman Kuf Chav Gimel. The Shulchan Aruch Mechaber discusses about shmarim, a case where you have sediments that are leftover remnants from the wine, and they were washed out and dried for 12 months. And then in a further halacha, so there he says that in that case, he allows you to use those sediments because they were both washed and dried out. And over there's a question in the Rishonim about if you need both of them, if you need both washed and dried. But two halachas later, the Mechaber writes that if you have a barrel of wine that has leftover parts to it that got hardened and stuck to the walls of the barrel, then You don't. He's more lenient. You don't need both the 12 months and the wash. You need 12 months. There's a question if you need mila v'iroy or things like that. So the question in halacha is, why are you more? Is the mechaber more lenient in the second case than in the first case? And what seems to be some of the explanation, some of those that explain it, is that the difference is shmarim is part of the wine. It's the skins and the seeds of the wine, that even if you dry them out, it's possible to reconstitute it back into wine. It still is based from grape, and it still has a flavor of grape. So yes, it's dried out, and it doesn't have currently the ability to give a taste of wine. But if you don't follow the rules of Tamdan, the rules over there in Sifi Dalet, then it's asur. However, the second case is more similar to cream of tartar, where it's a white powder that's left over from the wine, and that powder doesn't really have the properties of wine. It has a property of a powder that has a certain acidity to it, which once the wine taste is removed, it's not going to redevelop the wine taste. It's not going to come back to a flavor of wine. The question, some say that the Shulchan Aruch there also insists that it has to be 12 months as well. Now, so it would seem to be, if you hold that, then if you had a cream of tartar that was aged for 12 months, that was old 12 months, maybe you'll be allowed. However, there are poskim there, the Taz and others are Shal, that say clearly, they argue on this din, and they say that when it comes to cream, to this type of acid, this tartaric acid, that even the 12 months wouldn't help to allow something that came from Stam Yeinam. The Beis Meir, he makes sort of like out of a pshara, but he interprets the mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch, to mean not that you're allowed to take this ingredient and use it in food products, because it's based out of Stam Yain. It's based out of wine, not kosher wine. How could you use it outright? He means to say that if you have a barrel and it has in it some of this dried out white powder, so you don't have to go make an effort to clean it out very well. You could go ahead and put more wine in it and age more wine. You don't have to clean it out that well. But it's more about the kalim, not the thing itself. So to use it out, even to use it outright, in the old method is questionable. Nowadays, the process is done differently. Rabbi Belsky writes a tshuva about it, that today's process would be similar to drying for 12 months, and even better. First of all, it brings proof that we find that drying it mechanically would be equal to drying it 12 months. And in addition, the process today is very refined. Because the factory, the company, the technology today, we know how to get the powder separated from all the wine flavor. By what they'll do is they'll refine it, they'll use some different acids to remove all the other parts, and then they centrifuge it. What a centrifuge is like, it's like a dryer. And in dryer, if you want to dry your clothing, so you spin the dryer, and because it spins at such a high force, that the solids stay inside the chamber, and the liquids, because they're fluid, they're able to go out of the holes, be removed from the holes quickly. So too with this powder, this tartar, the cream of tartar, when they centrifuge it, they spin it very quickly. But there, the powder is small particles. So if it would spin, everything will go out. So what they have is like a material bag that they put the cream of tartar inside, and then when they spin it, the moisture goes out, and the powder stays inside the bag. That's one process. Then they crystallize it, and they dry it to remove any moisture, and then they grind it further to make it the right powder, the right consistency. So because the process today is very accurate and very technological advanced, so whatever material you have today is more like cream of tartar, much less wine flavor inside there. That's what Rabbi Belsky Tainus. You have Rabbi Weissman, the word of tshuva back, wrote a tshuva back saying that yes, today's refining is different than it was in the past, but not leval yusa, leger yusa. it's different than it was in the past. And he says that the core reason why you would allow it in the olden days is because after 12 months it dries out, yavish ka'etz, it's dried out entirely. And not only doesn't have grape flavor, it doesn't have flavor altogether. It doesn't have good value altogether. It's totally dried out. It's like pugum. But being that the process is done in a few hours instead of a few months, how could we say that it's dried out to a degree that it has no flavor and it has no value to it? The opposite, it has a lot of value to it. It's using so much production, so much products. And even if you want to say that it's pugum, that it doesn't have it's not edible, but when something, even if at one stage when you add acid to it, it loses its ability to be consumed as food, but the final product, the cream of tartar, is used in production. And pugum, we said even last time that something which was one-time pugum, if ultimately it's going to be used and it has very good properties, the very properties that are beneficial for food products, it would be considered shvach, and it wouldn't help that it's at one time wasn't pugum. And a lot of it has to do also with the use. Some of the uses are to enhance taste, and if it's to enhance taste, that for sure shows the value of it. There are other properties to help with the appearance, with the texture, with the color, and so there's differences between those. What the reason why you're using cream of tartar, but in general, I would say that more like the Heimishach Shedim will not use cream of tartar. In Israel, most Shedim will not. And in Chutzlar, Shedim, the Heimishach Shedim will not here as well. But national Shedim here. And Israel, some of the Rabbanut Chedim, I think I saw a tshuva from Rabbi Yosef writing, explaining why the Sprite today at Israel is not a problem, because, and he explains goes through the whole process. But again, it's based on the fact that cream of tartar, according to those opinions, would be more kal today than it was in the past, as opposed to the others that hold that today it's more chomer than the past, and even in the past it was shaylos. So that is about cream of tartar.
It's not like a kosher. They don't make it kosher. I mean, there's no kosher companies There's no kosher companies that produce it.
So not there is no. There's very little kosher cream of tartar on the market that's made kosher to begin with. It's used in certain companies that do use cream of tartar, use a kosher. There is a possibility of cream of tartar to be synthetic. I don't know how popular that is. And there is a possibility also of cream of tartar being done from other fruit besides grape, but it's mostly it's done with grape, and it's as far as I understand, mostly it's the natural cream of tartar. So when you're dealing with something which, if you have a hechsher that you would say is machmir in these areas, then if they're using cream of tartar, you would assume that they're using a cream of tartar that would be from a kosher source or a synthetic source, but. If you're buying something with a national hechsher in it, then you have to make sure that the cream of tartar that they're using is a good one. If you want to be machmer in this area,
so I can't go to the store and buy it off the shelf, like
cream of tartar.
Yeah.
Right. If you're machmer in this area, yes. Let's speak about another shayla here, and it relates also to someone suggested that I should try to be more practical. So one of the shaylos we deal with kasher and kalim would be if you bought a new keli, if you bought a new pot, a new dish, it's factory sealed. Do you have to kasher it? Is there a reason to kasher it? So there's a few aspects to this, and I'm not going to touch so much on the way it was made. In other words, there are equipment, frying pans, pots, that the way they're processed, they use oils to shine them, to finish them, aluminum foil. They may use different oils to make sure that it doesn't rub against metal. And there are the processing aids that could be used, and those have their own shaylos if they need a hechsher, or if you bought them without a hechsher, do you need kashering? That is its own shayla. But let's assume we don't need to kosher because of that. You're buying a new factory sealed microwave from Walmart, from Target, from wherever you're buying it from. You're buying, a new pot sealed. Do you have to suspect that the company gave you a lemon? They gave you something that was used already. That someone yesterday returned his dish, and now you're getting his dish that he tested and returned. You're getting the same one, or that the factory decided to test a bunch of them out, and you're the one, you got that one. Do you have to chayshish for that? And how it relates to the kashrus world is that there are a lot of highly specified equipment in the kashrus world that are custom made, and they're made for a specific company. And there's a question about those kalim. The company makes it new for you. Do you have to suspect that it was used before? So I'll tell you that once that I was surprised about this as well myself. There was a company that ordered a commercial fryer, imagine a deep fryer by by a pizza shop. You have a deep fryer to fry the falafel or the French fries. So not a small one, but a much larger commercial size fryer. They ordered it from Germany. Thank you. It was made to their specifications. It came sealed. When it arrived, the facility was owned by Fruma Yidden. They opened it up. They started assembling it, and they see that in some of the pipes there's some shortening, some fat. And they're shocked. They paid so much money to get a new piece of equipment, and here it's much there's this fat there. So they reached out to the company, and they said, "What's going on?" The company told them, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, before we sent it to you, we assembled it, and we wanted to make sure that it's working properly, and then we sent it to you. So we just, so obviously, the company, they asked the Rabbanim, and the Rabbanim said that they need to kosher it. So here you have a case where you got a new keli, you had to kosher. Why? Because the company, not realizing the kashrus implications, they felt that testing it is a normal thing to do. But that wasn't the only time. There was another time with a company that makes different chocolate coated products, and they bought from a company in Italy a large line on Robur, and Robur is sort of a tempering unit. So you have, when you make chocolate, there's a machine that melts the chocolate, and then it tempers it to make sure that the temperature is in the right temperature, so it doesn't bloom, it doesn't get out of whack, and it's able to be applied properly. And then it goes in. Then the chocolate gets poured onto the product, on the pretzel, on whatever the product is, and then it drips back into the melter, and the product gets cooled off and hardened. So that machine was brand new. They got it from Italy. They made it for them. And when they came in, I was visiting the company, and we saw them bringing the big machine in. And in that case also, we looked inside, and I see the pipes had chocolate inside of it. Outside it looked nice and clean, but inside, deep inside, there was some chocolate there. Not a lot, but enough to see it was used. So we had the company reach out. We had them reach out to the original company, and they said, yes, we test our machinery to make sure that it runs well. We're going to ship it all the way. It costs a lot of money, and what happens if it's not working when you get it? So I want to say that I tested it, but be assured that we used we gave pictures of what chocolate they used and what ingredients, and it was kosher or not. Either they had to be kosher because this was a para facility and they were using their chocolate that was, even though it was dark chocolate, but the hechsher was not para. And looking into this, I found that there were other Rabbanim Machshinim that were speaking about, and one Rav Machshir told me that he was in touch with a company that told him that the chocolate line, that every single machine, the chocolate machine that they send out, they test before they send it out. So it's not something which is rare, it's something which is common, and it's not only common, but it's assumed to be the case. So the question is, when do you have to suspect that a case like when do you have to suspect that something was used and you need koshering, and when could you trust, the company, and so I'll say, sort of the conventional standard is that when a company, you go to a company and they're making kosher product for you and they get new equipment, or they show to you the receipts that it was a new equipment, they show you the documentation, and you see it comes in sealed, what else do you have to suspect? But here you see that there is a certain, special. Now the question is, how far you have to go? Do you have to suspect that old equipment are being tested, or is this an individual case which relates to customized equipment? So really, in Shulchan Aruch, actually, it's something where you see the Alter Rebbe discusses this in Hilchos Pesach. And Shulchan Aruch, he discusses in the olden days when a lot of goyim made equipment in their homes, made privately. He discusses, if you're buying a keli from a guy, could you trust the guy that it's new? If he says it's new, so there's a machlekes about if you see the keli and it looks new, could you trust the guy? There's a whole machlekes about if the guy is Masiach Vituma, is he Neman, is that not Neman? But what comes out from that those dinim is that, first of all, if the guy is a kader, if he's a businessman, if he's an expert in his job, he's not making it as a hobby, he's making it as a business, then he has a reputation, then we don't even have to rely on his saying, but if we see and it looks like it's new, then we could buy from him the equipment because of his reputation, because this whole purpose of making him is to sell them. There's another opinion that says that anytime if you're buying a keli b'tech kelim, if you're buying one keli amongst other kelim, you don't have to suspect that the keli that you bought was used because he's making a bunch of kelim. Why would he use your keli? So, and Alter Rebbe passes that way. He says that those two, that if you're buying it from either if you're buying it from a goyish, a businessman, a kader, or you're buying it kelim b'tech kelim, then you could trust your own gut, so to speak. If you see that it looks like it's new, then you could assume it's new and not have to kasher it. Now, so I think when it comes to for personal use, if you're buying a keli from a Walmart or from a Target and it's sealed, even if there are reports, whether it's valid or not valid reports, that could be testing done, or could be things, or could be returns. Even though I've heard the returns is not really a big chash. It's a separate department. They will never sell it back. But even a smaller store, maybe where they do take returns and they do sell it back. But if you're buying a kelim, according to the Alter Rebbe, you don't have to assume that this keli was the one that was used, and the halacha, you don't have to kasher it because of that. Yeah, part of the factor why you have to be chayshes. One is because there's a bittul. There's a bittul b'roiv, and there's also it says that there if it's a miyut, if it's a you're not chayshes l'miyuta, if it's a very small miyut, also you're not chayshes in general. But the question is, and then also you have the svara that it's a kader, that he's a professional, and a professional also we don't have to suspect. But when it comes to the factories that are making customized kelim, so there, your premise is that he's a kader, that he's a professional, and he is not going. First of all, he's not kelim to kelim. You're not buying one keli amongst others. He's making it for you. So if he's making it for you, then it's like you're buying one keli from him. So the only thing you rely on is the fact that he's a professional. Well, what is he afraid of when he's professional? He's professional. Usually, a professional doesn't want to show a used keli because he's afraid if you'll catch him that it's used, you're going to give it back to him, or you're going to get upset at him. But here, if it's in the industry standard of a lot of companies to test these kelim, then if you catch them testing it, if you catch it dirty, they always have a tendency to say, "We tested it. We always test it," and they're not afraid of it. So Therefore, even if a company is not saying that, you still have to suspect it. And therefore, we discussed it with Weissman about it, and it's something which the Alter Rebbe has an interesting lashon when it comes to these kalim. He says that if you're that you don't trust, you're not trusting the guy telling you that it was used or not. It's nidik k'moshe hu omer. You have to have your own information. You have to have your own experience to see if it's used or not. You have to have the ability to understand the circumstances. If we would want to use it, or not want to use it. Like this case, they want to use it because they want to make sure that you don't have a faulty machine. They don't want to ship you a machine, it costs them so much to ship it, and then they find out it wasn't working, have to ship it back. Let's go to another topic. That is, we don't have too much time.
You tell them beforehand, don't test it.
So, I wouldn't rely on that, but it would be, you have to see what incentive they have to test it. Or for example, if you would have information from them, documentation about what they use there in the plant, what type of ingredients they have there in general to test, or things like that, you get more information. What could be the chashas? Like what could they test it with? If it's a chocolate factory, and we make sure they have in hand only par of chocolate, or things like that. So you work with the company to make sure that there's a lot of very little chash, very little reason for them to make a mistake, but not to go in with your eyes closed. So that would be something to look into. Now, another area where the shaylo comes up. So the din is that with Pas Yisrael, that if you have bread, it has to be Pas or Makban and Pas Yisrael. When it comes to breadcrumbs, there's a question about if you mixed it in with other products, is it need to be Pas Yisrael? The common thing is you'll mix in breadcrumbs into tuna to make it, or as a filler, or you mix it into other products, and you want to give it a more body. Does that still need to be Pas Yisrael? And really bad, in simple halacha, will say that that Amar already says that b'diavad it could be that it'll be mutter batal b'roiv, but l'chatchila you have to be makbid to be Pas Yisrael. But here I'm going to bring up an issue which is similar to that. So you have regular breadcrumbs that are loaves of bread that are baked conventionally, and then they're dried into crumbs. Then you have what's called panko breadcrumbs. Panko actually is called really panko. Pan is bread. Ko is a small bread. It's a Japanese type of breadcrumb. It's made differently than the other breadcrumbs. It's interesting because they don't bake it in a regular oven. They electrocute it pretty much. Doesn't sound good, but what they do is they mix it like regular dough, and then they'll put it into these boxes, these metal boxes, and those metal boxes go into an oven. Now, what is the source of heat? There's no fire there. There's no electric heating. There's an electric current that runs through a metal base. So there's like a little metal baskets. The dough falls into the basket, and it goes in the continuous belt in those baskets, in those metal baskets. And now with the metal baskets, when there's like a circuit of electric. When the basket closes, like the fourth one closes, then the electric has nowhere to go. Now, and the electric, what it does is it tries to go across from one side of the box has dough in the middle, and there's metal on one side, metal on the other side. So the electric trying to go across the dough to get to the other side of the metal, but the dough is resisting, and because it resists, it creates friction in the dough, which creates a low temperature baking. It takes a lot longer to bake than a regular dough, but what it does is when the dough is baked, it doesn't look like any bread you ever seen before, because usually bread bakes from the outside. You have an oven, the heat is in the outside of the oven, and the bread is inserted inside. So first the outer walls of the dough gets baked, and that's where it forms a nice crust. And then as the deeper you get inside the dough, the softer it is, the longer it takes to bake. So it could be if you underbaked it, that the inside of the dough is not fully baked, because the heat didn't penetrate the inside like the outside. But in this type of dough, the electric current is going through and through, and the only way you bake is there's no heat on the outside. The electric friction in the inside of the dough is actually causing it to bake. So it bakes in uniform, and when it comes out of the oven, it looks like the inside of a dough. Like you take a rye bread, cut out the crust, that's what it looks like. It looks like a piece of soft bread without any crust. And so they make breadcrumbs out of it, they'll chop it up, they'll dry it further, and they'll chop it up. But it has certain properties, the way it's structured, because of the way it's electric, it has certain properties that it's more fluffy, more crunchy. People like it. But the question is, does it need to be pas Yisrael? Does it need to be pas Yisrael like other breadcrumbs? And there's a dispute in between the pas in the Chayrim about that. There's a discussion about it because the question is, does it have a din of pas? If you bake not through a regular conventional baking with fire, if you bake b'chama, does it have, with a source that's other than fire, in case of it, whether you're baking it in the sun or you're baking it with electric, it's not the original piece of fire. The question is, does it have a din? Does it require pas Yisrael or not? And those that say, they bring a raya from Rashba, similar to the Bechala, that if it's not made like a conventional dough, conventional bread, conventional pas, it's made from a different source, it wouldn't require it to be pas Yisrael. But when we were to discuss the Rabbi Weiss model, he says, first pointed out that in Shulchan Aruch, that writes that the dinim does not mention this as a criteria for pas Yisrael. It doesn't write that if it's a fiyah b'chama, if it was baked in the sun, it would not require pas Yisrael. And so what we did was we wanted we should go to bring the people and have them taste it and tell us what they think. And we went to a bunch of goyim that are not makbid on pas Yisrael, and got their opinions about this bread, and the comments were pretty much that besides the fact that it's not salty, it tastes like regular bread. It tastes similar to regular bread. Maybe it's a little soft, but it wasn't nothing very different than regular bread. And so therefore, there'll be a reason why it would require to be pas Yisrael. So again, if you're makbid on pas Yisrael for regular breadcrumbs, is a good enough reason to be makbid also with panko. But there are achsherim, there are rabbanim that will say that no, because it's baked in a different, not a conventional way. It's baked with electric, without heat, that it wouldn't require to be pas Yisrael. But that's a taste of some of the shaylos.
What's the difference between breadcrumbs and bread?
And bread? Oh, there's another question. As far as pas Yisrael?
Yeah.
Well, the question is, it doesn't have the surah of bread. The question is, the surah of bread, now there's a room to what?
It had before.
What? Yeah, so it depends a lot on brechas hanenin about when it comes to hamoitzi. If you take hamoitzi bread and then you chop it up into small pieces, does it still have a din of hamoitzi or not?
Sorry, Camille, at the end, is this sprouted and gluten-free bread? Or?
We didn't speak about that.
Did you mention it?
About
Gluten-free bread?
yeah, which part of it? About the bracha?
No, but required pas Yisrael.
So right. So
Ezekiel bread from.
Right. So you first really have to know how Ezekiel's bread is made. It's not made. There's a sort of a real sprout, and then there's a sprout. The way I understand is that it's still made into a batter of dough, similar to a regular dough. It's just the process of germinating the wheat before you make it into a dough is different. So I have heard Rabbanim saying that it's similar when it comes to the.
Still hamoitzi, still considered pas.
Yeah.
And gluten-free bread.
Gluten-free would depend on the recipe. The only thing that you could have gluten-free is oats. So it would depend on if it depends.
Rice and potato. Sometimes they do a free gluten-free, cereal-free bread.
Right. So that would be different brachas. It would have different brachas, obviously. And only if you had oat flour to make it would be a question about hamoitzi.
Yeah.